The name Yoda conjures images of wisdom, patience, and the purest dedication to the light side of the Force. For over 800 years, this diminutive master trained generations of Jedi, shaped the philosophy of the Order, and stood as a beacon against the darkness that perpetually threatened the galaxy.
His green lightsaber was wielded in defense, never in conquest.
His teachings emphasize serenity over passion, knowledge over aggression, defense over attack. But the Force flows through all living things, and no being, no matter how wise or powerful, exists beyond the reach of temptation. The dark side does not discriminate based on stature or reputation. In fact, the most luminous lights cast the deepest shadows when they fall. For 9 centuries, Yoda resisted the pull toward darkness, maintaining his center through meditation and unwavering adherence to the Jedi Code. Yet beneath that weathered green skin and those ancient eyes resided a connection to the Force unmatched by any Jedi of his era. What would happen if that connection, that vast reservoir of power accumulated over nearly a millennium of life, was turned toward the dark side? What if the wisdom that guided countless Jedi became perverted into cunning manipulation? What if patience became calculated cruelty and defense transformed into overwhelming aggression? The question itself seems impossible, a contradiction of everything the Jedi Grand Master represented. But the dark side thrives on impossibilities, feeding on the very emotions and attachments the Jedi suppress. Consider the scale of such a transformation. Yoda possessed a midi-chlorian count surpassed only by the Chosen One himself, Anakin Skywalker. He mastered Force abilities that other Jedi could only dream of achieving. His lightsaber technique in Form 4 Ataru compensated for his small stature through acrobatic ferocity that overwhelmed opponents. He could absorb and redirect Force lightning, a feat demonstrated against both Count Dooku and Emperor Palpatine. His telepathic abilities allowed him to communicate across star systems. He unlocked the secret of maintaining consciousness after death, becoming one with the Force, while retaining his identity as a Force ghost. All of these abilities were honed through the disciplined study of the light side. Imagine them amplified by the dark side's seductive promise of unlimited power. The Sith Code teaches that through passion one gains strength, through strength, power, through power, victory, through victory, broken chains. For someone who had trained for 8 centuries in the opposite philosophy, the sudden liberation from the Jedi's restrictions could unleash something the galaxy had never witnessed. Even Dooku, Yoda's former apprentice who fell to become Darth Tyrannus. In a moment during the Clone Wars, when tricks of light cast shadows across Yoda's face, Dooku experienced a vision that chilled him to his core. He saw what Yoda might become if darkness ever claimed him. In that instant, Dooku understood that if Yoda turned to the dark side, even Darth Sidious himself would be annihilated. The universe had not yet comprehended the magnitude of evil that a Jedi Master of nearly 900 years could wield if he unleashed his full power without restraint. This is not merely speculation about raw Force strength, though that alone would be catastrophic. The true danger lies in Yoda's unparalleled knowledge. He had studied the Jedi archives more thoroughly than perhaps any master in history. He knew the locations of ancient Sith tombs, the theories behind forbidden techniques, the weaknesses in every lightsaber form. He had trained most of the Jedi Council members personally, understanding their psychological vulnerabilities and combat tendencies intimately. He possessed strategic acumen demonstrated through his leadership during the Clone Wars, comprehending military tactics on a galactic scale. A Dark Yoda would not be a mindless engine of destruction like some fallen Jedi who succumbed to rage and lost themselves in passion. He would be methodical, patient, and terrifyingly intelligent. The same wisdom that made him a great teacher could identify exactly how to corrupt, manipulate, and destroy his former students. The same foresight that allowed him glimpses of the future could be turned toward ensuring the dark side's ultimate victory. The same compassion that drove him to protect life could invert into systematic cruelty designed to break spirits before ending lives. But what could possibly cause such a transformation? What event or betrayal could push the galaxy's greatest Jedi Master toward the abyss? The answer requires us to examine the moments when Yoda came closest to doubt, to failure, to despair. The relationship between Yoda and Count Dooku represents one of the great tragedies of the Star Wars saga. When Dooku was chosen as Yoda's Padawan in 86 BBY, it marked a rare occasion. Grandmasters seldom took direct apprentices, preferring to focus on their administrative duties and teaching younglings in groups. But Yoda saw something exceptional in the young man from Sereno, a prodigious talent that warranted personal attention. For years they journeyed across the galaxy together. Yoda demonstrated his legendary skills in both combat and diplomacy, and Dooku absorbed every lesson. On Kashyyyk, the young Padawan watched in awe as his master defeated a Terrantech, one of the most fearsome creatures in the galaxy, twisted by dark side alchemy into a living weapon specifically designed to hunt Jedi. The bond between master and apprentice grew strong through shared trials and philosophical discussions that lasted long into countless nights. Dooku eventually achieved the rank of Jedi Knight, then Master, then earned a seat on the High Council itself. By all measures, he represented one of Yoda's greatest successes. The transmission of wisdom from one generation to the next, the very purpose of the Jedi Order, seemed to have worked flawlessly. Yet beneath the surface, cracks had formed in Dooku's faith in both the Order and the Republic it served. He witnessed corruption go unpunished, saw the Jedi become increasingly political rather than principled, and grew frustrated with what he perceived as the Order's complacency in the face of systemic injustice. When Dooku's own apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, was killed by Darth Maul on Naboo in 32 BBY, something broke inside the aging Jedi Master.
He had already been questioning the Order's direction, but the loss of his former student severed his last connection to the Jedi way.
Shortly after Dooku left the Order entirely, returning to Sereno to claim his noble title and inheritance. The Council, including Yoda, interpreted this as a political idealist, choosing a different path to serve the galaxy. They were wrong. Dooku had been approached by Darth Sidious, who recognized the disillusionment festering within him and offered something the Jedi never could, the promise that through the dark side he could acquire the power to reshape the galaxy according to his vision. Dooku became Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to Sidious, and began orchestrating the separatist movement that would tear the Republic apart. When Yoda finally confronted Dooku on Geonosis, witnessing his former apprentice wielding red lightning and a crimson lightsaber, the Grand Master's heart broke in ways that 8 centuries of life had not prepared him for. Their duel lasted only moments before Dooku fled. But in those moments, Yoda realized the magnitude of his failure. He had trained one of the most powerful Sith Lords in a millennium. Every skill Dooku demonstrated, every tactical maneuver, every psychological manipulation, Yoda had taught him the foundations for all of it. Throughout the Clone Wars, Yoda held on to hope that Dooku could be redeemed. Ancient writings mention a short story from the anthology The Clone Wars, Stories of Light and Dark, that reveals Yoda undertook a secret mission to meet with the Toydarian king Katuunko, hoping it might lead to an encounter with his fallen apprentice. Yoda believed their bond could bring Dooku back to the light, ending the war without further bloodshed. That meeting never occurred. Instead, the war dragged on for 3 years, consuming millions of lives and corrupting the Jedi from peacekeepers into generals. When Anakin Skywalker killed Dooku aboard the Invisible Hand above Coruscant, Yoda felt the death through the Force. His former Padawan, the student he had believed in despite all evidence of his corruption, was gone. There would be no redemption, no reconciliation, no chance to understand where Yoda's teaching had failed so catastrophically. The Jedi Council had eventually authorized Quinlan Vos to assassinate Dooku, showing how desperate they had become. The mere fact that they had contemplated killing a former Jedi Master rather than attempting to save him represented everything wrong with how the Order had evolved during the war. Now imagine this scenario playing out differently. Imagine that instead of Anakin executing Dooku, Yoda arrives first. He confronts his former apprentice, and during their duel, Dooku speaks words carefully crafted by Sidious to wound his old master most deeply. Perhaps Dooku reveals how Sidious had been manipulating the Clone Wars from both sides, how the Jedi Order had become unwitting pawns in a Sith plot spanning decades. Perhaps he explains how the dogmatic restrictions of the Jedi Code prevented them from truly helping people, kept them from forming the attachments that make life worth living. Or perhaps Dooku simply looks at Yoda with a mixture of pity and contempt and says that he learned everything from him, including that power ultimately matters more than principle. That all of Yoda's wisdom and compassion meant nothing when confronted by someone willing to embrace the expedience of the dark side. That Yoda's greatest student surpassed him by having the courage to abandon outdated teachings and seize the strength necessary to reshape the galaxy. In this moment, standing over the body of his dying apprentice, Yoda confronts a truth he has spent 8 centuries avoiding. The Jedi lost. Not just this battle, but the larger war. The Sith outmaneuvered them at every turn. The Republic they served had become corrupt beyond redemption. The Order he led had transformed into soldiers rather than peacekeepers. And most damning of all, every attempt to maintain the light had only strengthened the darkness. The Jedi Code demands that there is no emotion, there is peace. But Yoda feels rage bubbling up from depths he did not know existed within him. Not at Dooku alone, but at the entire system that created this outcome. Rage at the Republic's corruption that drove idealists like Dooku to seek power through darkness. Rage at the Jedi Council's blindness that prevented them from sensing Sidious's plot until far too late. Rage at his own failure to see the cracks forming in his apprentice's faith. Rage at the Force itself for allowing such suffering to persist despite his lifetime of service. The Code teaches that there is no ignorance, there is knowledge. But what good is knowledge if it cannot prevent catastrophe? Yoda knew more about the Force than any living being, yet this wisdom did not save the Jedi from destruction. He had studied for centuries, meditated on the deepest mysteries of the Force, unlocked secrets that others could barely comprehend. None of it mattered when confronted by enemies willing to lie, manipulate, and murder without constraint. There is no passion. There is serenity. But serenity is a luxury afforded only to those who do not watch their life's work crumble around them. Serenity is what Yoda maintained while the galaxy burned, while his students died in a war engineered by the enemy he failed to detect. He had been serene for 800 years, and where had it led? To the brink of the Jedi's extinction. There is no chaos, there is harmony. The galaxy drowns in chaos. Trillions suffer under the Republic's bureaucratic indifference and the separatist droid armies. Both sides are puppets in a conflict manufactured by Sidious to consolidate power. The harmony Yoda sought was always an illusion, a comforting lie told by those too weak to confront reality. There is no death, there is the Force. But death had come for so many. For Qui-Gon Jinn, Yoda's greatest indirect student, who might have saved Anakin from falling. For thousands of Jedi who trusted in the Force and died anyway, betrayed by the clone soldiers they commanded. For Dooku himself, whose fall began the moment he questioned whether death might sometimes be preferable to living in a galaxy where the innocent suffer. In this darkest moment, when 8 centuries of philosophy crumbles before the evidence of its failure, Yoda makes a choice that will echo through history. He reaches out through the Force, not seeking the light's peaceful embrace, but grasping for the power that has allowed the Sith to survive for millennia despite the Jedi's best efforts to destroy them. He allows his rage to flow freely for the first time in his long life, channeling it into a connection with the dark side. The transformation begins immediately. Force lightning, which Yoda had only ever deflected or absorbed, now crackles from his own fingers. The energy feels different than when it was used against him, not invasive and painful, but exhilarating, empowering, right? His entire body surges with strength that makes his previous Force Valor technique seem like a pale imitation. Every sense sharpens. Every muscle responds with vigor he has not felt in centuries. But the physical changes pale before the mental shift. Suddenly, possibilities that would have horrified him moments before now seem not just acceptable, but necessary. The Jedi failed because they limited themselves with arbitrary rules about emotion and attachment. The Sith succeeded through pragmatism and the willingness to do whatever victory required. If the choice is between clinging to failed principles or embracing the power to reshape the galaxy, then the answer becomes obvious. Yoda's eyes, which had been a calm shade of green-tinged amber for 800 years, begin to glow with a sickly yellow as the dark side saturates every cell of his being. His skin, already weathered by age, takes on a more pallid quality. The transformation is not as visually dramatic as with younger Force users because his features were already ancient, but those who know him would recognize the change instantly. Something fundamental has shifted in the way he moves, the way he regards the world, the expression in his eyes. Standing over Dooku's corpse, the being who was Yoda reaches a conclusion. The Jedi Order must be destroyed. Not merely defeated or reformed, but utterly annihilated. They have proven themselves incapable of adapting to the galaxy's realities. They have become so attached to their own righteousness that they cannot see how their inflexibility enables evil to flourish. They claim to serve the Force, but they understand only half of its nature, crippling themselves by denying the power that darkness offers. The Sith have the right philosophy. Might determines what is right, but they have squandered their advantage through Bane's rule of 2. Limiting the dark side's practitioners to a master and apprentice has made them secretive and cautious when they should be dominant and bold. With Yoda's knowledge of Jedi combat techniques, understanding of Republic politics, and connections throughout the galaxy, combined with the dark side's power, a new order can be established. Not Jedi who are too weak, not Sith who are too limited. Something new, something stronger. The name comes to him in a moment of dark clarity: Darth Minch. The name Minch appears in old Jedi legends, associated with his species, but now it will become synonymous with terror. The title, Darth, announces his allegiance to the Sith tradition, while his chosen name honors what he was before the transformation, a reminder that even the greatest Jedi could fall, that no one exists beyond corruption's reach. Darth Minch extends his hand toward Dooku's lightsaber, pulling it to him with a thought. The red crystal within pulses with dark side energy, singing a song of anger and domination. His own green lightsaber, the symbol of his life as Grand Master, feels foreign now. He ignites both blades, studying the contrast. The green represents 8 centuries of failure. The red represents the future. With deliberate slowness, he deactivates his green blade for the final time and attaches it to his belt as a trophy. The red lightsaber feels natural in his hand despite its different weight distribution. He can feel the corrupted kyber crystal's resentment at being bent to the dark side, its continued resistance against its current nature, good. Resistance must be overcome. The crystal will learn, as all the galaxy will learn, that strength alone matters. His first priority requires securing a base of power. Order 66 has not yet been executed. That will come soon as Yoda can sense Sidious preparing to spring his trap. But Darth Minch will not be caught unprepared like his former colleagues. He reaches out through the Force, connecting with the clone troopers throughout the galaxy. Their inhibitor chips make them vulnerable to Force manipulation. And with his centuries of experience in battle meditation, influencing them becomes almost trivial. Instead of the clones turning on the Jedi, they will follow new programming, his programming. When Sidious triggers Order 66, the clones will indeed eliminate Force sensitives as designed, but they will not discriminate between Jedi and Sith. Darth Sidious himself will face the surprise of his carefully cultivated army turning against him. The irony appeals to Darth Minch's newly cruel sense of humor. The architect of the Jedi's destruction will fall victim to the very weapon he created. But before Sidious can act, before the galaxy descends into the chaos that the Sith Lord has orchestrated for decades, Darth Minch must prepare. He needs allies, resources, knowledge. Fortunately, he knows exactly where to find all 3. The ancient Sith homeworld of Korriban had witnessed the rise and fall of countless Dark Lords throughout the millennia. Its red sands had drunk the blood of 1,000 battles between rival Sith, and its tombs housed the preserved remains of legendary figures whose names inspired fear even among those who worshipped the dark side. The Valley of the Dark Lord stood as a monument to Sith supremacy, containing the burial chambers of Ajuntapal, Marka Ragnos, Tulak Horde, and dozens of other masters who had shaped galactic history through their mastery of darkness. When Darth Minch's ship descended toward the valley, the very atmosphere seemed to recoil in recognition. Here was a being whose connection to the Force dwarfed even the ancient Sith Lords who had considered themselves gods. Where they had trained for decades to achieve mastery, he had studied for centuries. Where they had learned to wield the dark side through trial and error. He possessed intimate knowledge of the light side's techniques that could be inverted and perverted into weapons the old Sith had never imagined. The entrance to Naga Sado's tomb beckoned. This ancient Dark Lord who had led the Sith Empire against the Republic 5,000 years ago had been a master of Sith sorcery and illusion. His knowledge, recorded in holocrons and inscribed on the very walls of his burial chamber, would provide the foundation for what Darth Minch intended to build. The Jedi archives contained references to these tombs, warnings about the dangers they posed, but Yoda had studied those warnings more thoroughly than any of his colleagues. He knew what treasures lay hidden within the darkness. Stepping into the tomb, Darth Minch felt the accumulated dark side energy of millennia wash over him. Where a less experienced Force user might have been overwhelmed or corrupted beyond recognition, he simply opened himself to the power and absorbed it. His body, already saturated with dark side energy from his transformation, drank in the ambient malevolence like a desert drinks rain. The ancient spirits that haunted this place sensed his presence and recognized a kindred darkness far more profound than any who had walked here in centuries. The holocron of Nagasado materialized before him, its pyramid shape pulsing with red light. Holocrons were gatekeepers of knowledge, designed to test those who sought their wisdom, presenting challenges to determine worthiness.
But Darth Minch had helped design some of the Jedi holocrons, understanding their underlying principles.
He extended his consciousness into the device, bypassing its security with the same ease that a locksmith opens a door whose mechanism he created.
Knowledge flooded his mind. Techniques for creating illusions so powerful that entire fleets could be deceived into seeing phantom armadas. Rituals for draining life force from living beings and channeling it into overwhelming displays of force power. Methods for corrupting kyber crystals not merely into red-bladed weapons but into objects of such dark resonance that merely touching them could begin a Force-sensitive's fall toward darkness. Nagasado's expertise in Sith alchemy, which he had used to create the Massassi warriors who served him on Yavin 4, now belonged to the newest Dark Lord. But Sado's knowledge represented merely the beginning. Darth Minch moved through the Valley of the Dark Lords like a conqueror claiming tribute from defeated enemies. In Tulak Horde's tomb, he discovered techniques for lightsaber combat that predated even Form 1 Shicho, the most ancient Jedi style. Horde had been perhaps the greatest lightsaber duelist in Sith history, a warrior whose skills in battle were matched only by his mastery of Sith sorcery. The combination of techniques, a lifetime of studying Jedi forms, combined with Horde's savage elegance, would make Darth Minch utterly unpredictable in combat. Ajunta Pal's tomb yielded insights into the very foundations of the dark side itself. Paul had been among the first Dark Jedi, one of the original exiles who discovered Korriban and began the Sith tradition of combining Force sensitivity with the native Sith species' dark side affinity. His holocron contained philosophical treatises on the nature of power and the weakness inherent in the Jedi's self-imposed restrictions. More importantly, it detailed how the first Dark Jedi had broken free from the limitations of their training, embracing emotions and attachments that the Order forbade. Marka Ragnos, whose reign as Dark Lord had lasted over a century, offered understanding of patience and political manipulation. Ragnos had not held power through overwhelming force alone, though he possessed that in abundance. He had maintained his position by keeping potential rivals fighting among themselves while he consolidated control. His spirit, still clinging to existence within the tomb, attempted to possess Darth Minch's body, seeking a new vessel for resurrection. The ancient Sith Lord's consciousness recoiled in horror when it touched Darth Minch's mind, discovering a will that had been forged across 8 centuries and now burned with dark purpose that made Ragnos' own ambition seem petty by comparison. As Darth Minch emerged from the valley, his robe stained with the red dust of Korriban, he carried within his mind the accumulated knowledge of the Sith Empire's greatest masters. But this was merely one source of power. The Jedi archives contained their own dangerous secrets, information about the dark side that the Council kept locked away, believing that through suppression they could prevent its spread.
They were fools.
Knowledge cannot be destroyed, only hidden, and Yoda had known where every forbidden text was stored. Before his fall, he might have hesitated to access these texts, trusting in the Council's judgment about what knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Now, such hesitation seemed laughable. The Jedi had become weak precisely because they refused to understand their enemy. They fought the dark side while remaining willfully ignorant of its true capabilities, like soldiers going to battle blindfolded and calling it virtue. Returning to Coruscant required care. Order 66 had been executed in his absence, and the Jedi Temple burned under the assault led by the newly christened Darth Vader. Darth Sidious's plan had unfolded with the precision of a trap closing, and most of the Jedi were dead or scattered across the galaxy. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Bail Organa had discovered the massacre's aftermath, finding young Padawan learners cut down and the beacon that would have summoned surviving Jedi now turned into a trap. But Sidious remained unaware of the greatest threat to his new empire. While he consolidated power through the Senate, transforming it into a mechanism for his absolute rule, while Darth Vader hunted down the surviving Jedi with cold efficiency, Darth Minch prepared to strike. His 8 centuries of experience had taught him patience. The dark side offered quick power, yes, but the galaxy was not conquered in a day. True dominion required preparation, positioning, and the systematic elimination of threats. His first target was neither Sidious nor Vader, tempting as they were. Instead, Darth Minch sought out the scattered remnants of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan Kenobi had fled to Tatooine to watch over Luke Skywalker, Anakin's infant son.
Yoda himself had intended to hide on Dagobah in the original timeline.
But this version of events would play out quite differently. The surviving Jedi Masters, traumatized by the sudden destruction of everything they believed in, vulnerable in their grief and confusion, made perfect targets for corruption. Ki-Adi-Mundi, who had fallen on Megiddo during the initial execution of Order 66, was beyond reach, but others remained. The Wookiee Jedi Master Tivakar's former students scattered across the galaxy, the younglings who had been away from the temple on training missions, the Jedi who had been stationed at outposts too remote for the clone troopers to reach immediately. Each represented a potential convert to a new understanding of the Force. Darth Minch reached out through the Force, not as the gentle teacher they had known, but as a beacon of dark power that called to the anger and pain they all felt. The survivors had watched their friends die, their order destroyed, their purpose seemingly extinguished. In their darkest moments, alone and hunted, they felt a familiar presence touching their minds. Grand Master Yoda, they thought, still alive and reaching out to gather the remnants. They opened their minds to his call, desperate for guidance, for hope, for any connection to what they had lost. Too late, they realized their mistake. The presence that flooded their consciousness was not the Yoda they had known. This entity was ancient and terrible, carrying the weight of 800 years of accumulated power now bent toward domination. It spoke in Yoda's voice, but offered a philosophy that inverted everything the Jedi had taught. The dark side is not evil, it whispered. The dark side is natural. The Jedi's suppression of emotion was the true corruption, weakening you, preventing you from achieving your full potential. Look at what your devotion to the light accomplished. The Order is destroyed. Your friends are dead. The Republic you served has become an empire ruled by the very Sith you fought against. All your sacrifice, all your training, all your adherence to the code, it meant nothing in the end. Power is the only truth. The Sith understood this. The Jedi refused to accept it, and now they are gone. But you can be something greater. You can embrace the strength that the Jedi denied you. You can take revenge on those who destroyed your order. You can reshape the galaxy according to your will, instead of serving the will of corrupt politicians and blind councils. All you must do is surrender to the power that I offer. Accept the truth of the dark side and become what you were always meant to be. Some resisted. The Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, confronted by this corrupted version of his former teacher, rejected the offer with every fiber of his being. He recognized the techniques being used: mental manipulation, preying on grief and anger, offering power as a solution to loss. These were the same methods Sidious had used on Anakin. Obi-Wan shut his mind against the intrusion and fled deeper into hiding, knowing that if Darth Minch could find him once, the hunt would continue.
Others were less strong.
A Jedi Knight named Sha Kun, cousin to the late Plo Koon, had watched her entire clan die during the Purge. The Keldor were force-sensitive by nature, and the Empire had targeted them for extermination along with the Jedi. When Darth Minch's voice promised her the power to protect what remained of her people, to strike back at those who had committed genocide, the offer proved irresistible. She fell, becoming one of Darth Minch's Dark Jedi, the first of a new order that would combine Jedi training with Sith philosophy. A human Padawan named Dace Vinegar, barely 16 years old, had been on a training mission when Order 66 was executed. He returned to find his master dead and himself hunted across the galaxy. Living in constant fear, sleeping in hidden corners, eating when he could steal food, the teenage boy was receptive when a kindly mental voice offered him safety and the means to never be helpless again. By the time he realized the source of that voice, he was already too deep in the dark side to extract himself. One by one, Darth Minch gathered fallen Jedi and corrupted them. Not all. Many resisted successfully or died in the attempt, but enough. Within months of the Empire's formation, a shadow organization had begun to take shape. Officially, these Dark Jedi served the Empire, hunting down Jedi survivors alongside Vader's Inquisitorius. But their true allegiance was to Darth Minch, and they awaited his signal to turn against Sidious. The Emperor himself remained unaware of this growing threat. His focus was consumed with consolidating his new empire, rooting out pockets of Republic loyalists, and overseeing the construction of his ultimate weapon, the Death Star. Darth Vader, consumed by his own guilt and self-hatred, pursued Jedi survivors with mechanical efficiency, but lacked the broader awareness to detect his former master's transformation. Both Sith Lords were too confident in their victory, too certain that the Jedi were destroyed, to imagine that their greatest threat came from someone they had believed defeated. Meanwhile, Darth Minch established a hidden base on Dagobah, the very world where Yoda would have fled in the original timeline.
The planet's natural connection to the dark side, centered in a cave strong with corrupting energies, made it the perfect nexus for his power.
Here, he could meditate and reach out across the galaxy, influencing events through the Force while remaining undetectable.
The dark side energy that permeated the cave masked his presence, creating a void in the Force that made him invisible to those seeking him.
From this hidden stronghold, he began the systematic corruption of key Imperial officers. These were not Force-sensitive individuals who could resist his mental manipulation. They were ambitious men and women who had risen in the Empire's ranks through cunning and ruthlessness, already predisposed toward the dark side's philosophy without realizing it. A whispered suggestion here, a planted doubt there, and slowly these officers began to shift their loyalties. They believed themselves to be making their own decisions, unaware that every choice had been shaped by the subtle guidance of a being whose mastery of mental manipulation exceeded anything Sidious could achieve. Grand Moff Tarkin, the Emperor's most trusted military commander, proved particularly susceptible. His ruthless pragmatism and willingness to destroy entire worlds to maintain order made him receptive to the philosophy that power justified any action. When Darth Minch's voice began whispering in his mind during meditation sessions, suggestions about the Emperor's age, about Vader's unpredictability, about the opportunity for those with vision to shape the Empire's future, Tarkin listened. He did not fall to the dark side in any traditional sense, remaining a non-force-sensitive human, but his allegiance shifted from Sidious to the promise of something greater, guided by the voice that offered him a vision of the empire he could command. Admiral Conan Antonio Motti, the Death Star's commander, received similar treatment. His arrogance and dismissal of the Force as an ancient religion made him vulnerable to manipulation that played on his belief in technological superiority. The Death Star itself, a weapon designed to maintain the Emperor's control through terror, could be turned against its creator with the proper positioning of loyal officers. The inquisitorious Vader's team of fallen Jedi who hunted their former colleagues presented a special opportunity. These dark Jedi had already embraced the dark side, breaking with the Jedi Order but remaining subservient to the Sith. Darth Minch approached them not as a recruiter but as a master, offering greater knowledge. The Grand Inquisitor, the most powerful of their number, recognized the depth of understanding that this new teacher possessed, understanding that Vader lacked, having fallen so recently, and that Sidious refused to share, keeping his servants weak enough to control. One by one, the Inquisitors began secretly serving Darth Minch, while maintaining the appearance of loyalty to the Empire. They continued to hunt Jedi, but survivors they captured were not always delivered to Vader.
Some were taken instead to Dagobah, where Darth Minch gave them the same choice: join or die.
Most chose to join, recognizing that death was certain if they refused, while service at least offered the possibility of survival and perhaps eventual revenge against the Empire.
Within 5 years of the Empire's formation, Darth Minch commanded a secret army. Hundreds of fallen Jedi and Dark Force users scattered across the galaxy but connected through the Force to their new master. Key Imperial officers in positions of authority, believing themselves to be independent operators but subtly guided toward Darth Minch's goals. Entire military units whose commanders had been corrupted, ready to turn their weapons against the Emperor on command. The galaxy knew nothing of this growing threat. As far as anyone could tell, the Empire had achieved total victory. The Jedi were extinct or in hiding. The Sith ruled through Sidious and Vader. Rebellious systems were crushed with overwhelming force, and the Death Star's construction proceeded toward completion. Peace, through tyranny, seemed assured. But in his meditation chamber on Dagobah, Darth Minch smiled with grim satisfaction. 8 centuries of patience had taught him that true power came not from dramatic displays, but from careful preparation. The Sith had won through deception and planning that spanned decades. His own plan would span only years, but would be no less thorough. Every piece was moving into position. Every potential obstacle was being systematically neutralized or corrupted. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when its greatest guardian became its darkest threat. The Jedi Order had fallen. The Sith would follow, and from their ashes would rise something the Force had never witnessed. An empire ruled not by those who rejected half the Force's nature, but by one who understood and wielded both light and dark with the mastery that only 8 centuries of life could provide. The countdown to catastrophe had begun, though only one being in the galaxy knew it. Darth Sidious sat on his throne in the Imperial Palace, believing himself the architect of ultimate victory. Darth Vader patrolled the galaxy in his Star Destroyer, hunting the remnants of an order he believed destroyed. And in the swamps of Dagobah, something ancient and terrible prepared to teach the Sith the same lesson they had taught the Jedi, that overconfidence was a weakness, and that the dark side's greatest predator was not always the one you expected. The Imperial throne room on Coruscant had been designed to intimidate through sheer scale and oppressive darkness. Its towering ceiling disappeared into shadows, and the throne itself sat elevated at the end of a long approach that forced visitors to walk hundreds of meters while feeling the Emperor's gaze upon them. Darth Sidious had created this space to embody his power, to remind all who entered that they stood in the presence of the galaxy's master. Now, for the first time since the Empire's formation, genuine fear touched the Emperor's heart as he regarded the figure that had materialized before his throne without triggering any alarms or alerting any guards. Small, green-skinned and bent with age, yet radiating power through the force that made Sidious reassess every calculation he had made about the threats to his reign. "Yoda," the Emperor said, keeping his voice steady through an effort of will, "the Jedi Council believed you dead. My Inquisitors reported no sign of your survival. Yet here you stand." "Dead? The Jedi Master is," came the reply in that familiar inverted syntax that had once brought comfort to generations of Padawans. "But alive, Darth Minch remains." "Ancient I am, patient, watched you I have building your empire on foundations of sand." Sidious rose from his throne, lightning already crackling around his fingertips. He had not become the galaxy's supreme ruler by hesitating when threats presented themselves. His attack unleashed torrents of force lightning, the same power that had overwhelmed Mace Windu and countless other Jedi who had challenged him. The energy illuminated the throne room with flickering blue-white light, a display of raw dark side power that had never failed to destroy his enemies. Darth Minch raised one small hand, and the lightning stopped centimeters from his palm. Not deflected or absorbed in the way the Jedi had attempted, this was different. The energy simply ceased to exist, annihilated by a technique that Sidious recognized from the oldest Sith texts but had never witnessed successfully performed. The ancient ritual required such mastery of the Force that even attempting it could kill a lesser practitioner. Clearly, 8 centuries of life had given this fallen Jedi capabilities that exceeded anything Sidious had anticipated. "Impressive," Sidious acknowledged, switching tactics. His lightning intensified, drawing on reserves of power that he rarely needed to access. The throne room's temperature dropped as dark side energy saturated the air. "But you are only one being, and I am the culmination of 1,000 years of Sith planning. You cannot stand against the rule of two's perfection. A crutch for the weak it is." Darth Minch's eyes blazed with yellow fire as he moved forward with speed that defied his aged appearance. His lightsaber, red now, not the green blade that had once symbolized his dedication to the light, ignited with a harsh snap hiss.
"Limited to 2, the Sith have been."
Limited by fear and paranoia. Taught them better I shall. What followed was not a duel by conventional standards. Sidious was among the greatest lightsaber duelists ever to live, having killed 3 Jedi Masters in seconds during his confrontation with Mace Windu. But Darth Minch had studied lightsaber combat for 8 centuries, mastering every form and developing techniques that existed nowhere in the Jedi or Sith traditions. More importantly, his combat style incorporated the accumulated knowledge of every Sith holocron he had consumed on Korriban, blending ancient Sith lightsaber techniques with Jedi forms into something utterly unpredictable. Sidious found himself driven back toward his throne, his legendary skill barely sufficient to prevent the small figure before him from landing a killing blow. Every attack was countered before it fully developed. Every defense was penetrated by strikes from angles that should have been physically impossible. The Emperor's rage fueled his power, but Darth Minch's was a cold, controlled fury, refined across centuries, amplified by the dark side, but directed by a patience that the younger Sith Lord could never match. When Darth Vader burst into the throne room alerted by the disturbance in the Force, he arrived to witness something that shattered his understanding of power dynamics in the galaxy. His master, the being he had believed invincible, was losing. More than losing, he was being systematically dismantled by the Jedi Grand Master that Vader remembered from the temple, transformed into something darker than anything he had imagined possible.
Master Yoda? Vader's vocabulator rendered the disbelief in his voice.
No longer, Darth Minch replied without taking his attention from Sidious. Darth Vader, named by this failure who calls himself Emperor, but trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi, you were my student's student. Feel the bond between us, do you? The connection that your master never understood?
Vader ignited his crimson lightsaber and charged, loyalty to Sidious overriding his confusion.
But as he engaged Darth Minch, something unprecedented occurred. The small Sith Lord fought both of them simultaneously, his Form 4 Ataro acrobatics carrying him between the two combatants while landing strikes that kept them off balance. Every moment of training that Anakin Skywalker had received from Obi-Wan, who had been trained by Qui-Gon, who had been trained by Dooku, who had been trained by Yoda, all of it was familiar to Darth Minch because he had been the source. He knew every tendency, every technique, every psychological pressure point that Vader possessed. The battle raged through the throne room, destroying furniture and leaving scorch marks on the walls from deflected Force lightning. But the outcome became increasingly inevitable. Sidious and Vader were powerful, yes, but they were two Sith Lords with decades of training fighting someone who had 8 centuries of experience, now amplified by unrestricted access to the dark side's power. When Darth Minch finally disarmed Sidious and sent Vader flying into a wall with a force push that cracked the ancient stone, the Emperor's reign effectively ended. Chosen One, Anakin was called, Darth Minch said, approaching the fallen Sidious. Bring balance to the Force, he would. But understood, the Jedi did not. Balance requires both light and dark, not the extinction of one. Made the same mistake you have. Believed destroying the Jedi would secure your power. Wrong, you were. The Force itself demands equilibrium. Then what are you? Sidious gasped, feeling his life force begin to drain as Darth Minch placed a small 3-fingered hand on his chest. The technique was ancient Sith sorcery, stealing life energy to extend one's own existence. You claim to represent balance, yet you embrace only darkness. Balance? No. Understanding, yes. The Jedi rejected the dark side, made themselves incomplete. The Sith rejected the light, made themselves unstable. I reject nothing. Embrace everything I do, and that makes me stronger than either of you ever imagined possible. Darth Sidious, Emperor of the Galactic Empire, architect of the Jedi's extinction,
The most powerful Sith Lord in a millennium,
died in his throne room without ceremony or witnesses beyond the cyborg who had been his apprentice. His consciousness dissipated into the Force, and his body crumbled to ash as Darth Minch consumed every particle of life energy that remained. Vader, struggling to rise despite his damaged armor, stared at the remains of his master. "What happens now?" he asked. "Rise you will, serve me you may, if wisdom you possess. Or die here, as your master did. A choice I give you." More than he ever offered anyone. The choice presented to Vader was the same choice Darth Minch had presented to dozens of fallen Jedi. Join or die. But unlike those others, Vader represented a unique opportunity. He was the chosen one, born of the Force itself, with a midichlorian count that exceeded even Yoda's. His potential had been crippled by his injuries on Mustafar and his psychological torment, but that potential still existed. Under proper guidance, freed from Sidious's manipulation and lies, Vader could become something greater than either Jedi or Sith had imagined.
You offer me power? Vader's vocabulator processed the bitter laugh. Sidious promised the same.
Look where it led. Power I offer not. Understanding instead. Your wife? Dead she is.
Your fault, Sidious said. Lied to you, he did.
Died in childbirth she did, but not from your actions. From a broken heart, from betrayal, from watching you fall. Save her you could not, but children she gave you. Twins, alive they are. Vader's rage exploded outward, cracking the walls of the throne room. Liar! The Emperor told me. What he needed you to believe he told you. Controlled through guilt and grief, you were. Easy to manipulate, a broken man is. But the truth I give you. Luke and Leia Skywalker, hidden from you they were. Find them now you could. Train them. Give them what Obi-Wan and I failed to give you. Balance instead of repression. The implications staggered Vader. Children. Padme's children. His children. Alive. Hidden. He could sense Darth Minch's honesty through the Force. This was not manipulation, not another lie designed to control him. This was genuine information offered without condition, a gift from someone who claimed to reject both Jedi and Sith philosophy in favor of something different. Why tell me this? Because alone powerful you may be, but together unstoppable we become. The Empire needs rebuilding. Not as Sidious envisioned, oppression and fear ruling through superweapons, but as something stronger. The Dark Jedi have gathered. Skilled they are, but not powerful like you. Your children, strong in the Force they will be. Trained properly, balanced between light and dark, a new generation they could lead. Vader knelt, not out of servitude, as he had knelt to Sidious, but in acknowledgement of having been offered something he never expected, truth, and the possibility of redemption, not through rejecting the dark side, but through understanding both sides of the Force completely. What would you have me do? First, announce to the Empire that Sidious has fallen. Confirm me as the new Emperor. Then, reach out to your children, not to turn them, not to corrupt them, but to teach them. Show them that the Force is not divided into light and dark, Jedi and Sith. Show them that strength comes from accepting all aspects of oneself. The announcement sent shock waves through the galaxy. Emperor Palpatine was dead, killed by an ancient being claiming to be the fallen Jedi Master Yoda. Imperial officers who had been corrupted by Darth Minch's subtle influence immediately declared their support for the new regime. Those loyal to Sidious attempted resistance but found their clone trooper units turning against them. The same inhibitor chips that had enabled Order 66 now reprogrammed to follow Darth Minch's commands. The Death Star, still under construction, was seized by Grand Moff Tarkin and Admiral Motti, who revealed themselves as agents of the New Order.
The superweapon that Sidious had intended as his ultimate tool of terror became instead a symbol of the galaxy's transformation. Powerful, yes,
but now directed by someone who understood that true dominion came not from destruction alone, but from the systematic elimination of opposition, combined with the corruption of those who could be turned. Not everyone submitted willingly. Obi-Wan Kenobi, hidden on Tatooine and watching over Luke Skywalker, realized that his worst nightmare had materialized.
A.
The one being he had trusted absolutely, the Grand Master who had guided the Jedi Order through centuries, had become the very thing they had dedicated their lives to, opposing. When Vader arrived on Tatooine seeking his son, the confrontation between former master and apprentice was inevitable. But this time, they did not fight alone. Darth Minch appeared as well, his small form somehow casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the binary sun's light. Obi-Wan faced both of them, knowing he could not win but refusing to surrender the boy without resistance.
"Failed you, I did," Darth Minch said. "Failed all my students. The Jedi way was wrong and taught it to you anyway, I did. But learn from mistakes one can. Luke Skywalker will not repeat our errors. Balance, he will learn. Understand, you must. This is not corruption. This is evolution. You speak of balance, but I see only darkness." Obi-Wan's blue lightsaber illuminated the desert. The Yoda I knew would never have embraced the Sith philosophy. The Yoda you knew was incomplete. Centuries of suppressing emotion, denying attachment, pretending that half the Force did not exist, that was the true corruption. The Jedi caused their own destruction through their refusal to evolve. Learn from their failure, the galaxy must. Or repeat it. It will. The duel was brief. Obi-Wan fought with the skill of a master and the desperation of a guardian protecting the innocent. But he faced beings whose power exceeded his understanding.
When he fell, Darth Minch offered him the same choice given to others: join or die.
Obi-Wan chose death, disappearing into the Force and leaving his cloak and lightsaber behind.
Luke Skywalker, unaware of the confrontation that had taken place, continued his simple life on a moisture farm. But in the Force, plans had been set in motion that would reshape his destiny and, through him, the galaxy. The new empire that emerged under Darth Minch's rule differed dramatically from Sidious's vision. Gone was the doctrine of rule through fear and oppression. Instead, a philosophy emerged that emphasized strength through understanding, power through balance, and control through merit rather than tyranny. Force-sensitive children were still taken for training, but they learned to access both light and dark aspects of the Force, developing a wholeness that the Jedi had never permitted. The Death Star, completed under Tarkin's supervision, became a symbol not of terror, but of authority. Its superlaser fired only once, destroying Alderaan as a demonstration to rebellious systems that resistance remained futile, but afterward served primarily as a mobile headquarters for the Empire's military. The threat of its use proved sufficient to maintain order without the need for constant violence. Vader, reunited with his children, became a teacher rather than an enforcer. Luke and Leia learned the truth of their parentage and were given a choice: reject their father and the philosophy of balance he now embraced, or learn to wield the Force in ways that neither Jedi nor Sith had mastered.
Both, eventually, chose to learn.
The alternative, remaining ignorant while beings of such power shaped the galaxy's future, seemed more dangerous than accepting tutelage from their father and the ancient master who had orchestrated everything. As years passed, the galaxy stabilized under a new order, not the constant warfare between Jedi and Sith that had characterized previous eras, not the oppressive tyranny of Sidious's vision. Instead, an empire ruled by those who understood that the Force was neither inherently good nor evil, that power came from accepting all aspects of existence rather than denying half of reality. The rebellion which had formed to oppose Sidious's cruelty found itself without clear direction. Many of its leaders recognized that while the new empire was far from perfect, it was also far from the nightmare they had been fighting against. Mon Mothma one of the rebellion's founders, found herself in lengthy negotiations with imperial representatives who spoke of balance and cooperation rather than subjugation. The discussions were surreal, debating governmental philosophy with beings who wielded the dark side while claiming to represent something beyond traditional Sith ideology. Some continued to resist on principle, viewing any centralized authority as inherently corrupt. Saw Gerrera and his partisans refused any compromise, seeing Darth Minch as simply another tyrant wearing a different mask. They launched guerrilla attacks against Imperial installations, targeting the infrastructure that supported the new regime, but their efforts gained less traction than they had against Sidious. The new Empire did not respond to terrorism with mass retaliation against civilian populations. Instead, Darth Minch's Dark Jedi hunted the partisans with surgical precision, eliminating threats while minimizing collateral damage. It was pragmatic rather than cruel, effective rather than vindictive. Most of the rebellion's leadership eventually accepted that the galaxy had changed in ways they could never have predicted. Princess Leia Organa, adopted daughter of Bail Organa and secretly one of the twins that Vader sought, found herself in an impossible position when her true parentage was revealed.
Her adoptive father had been executed by Tarkin in the original timeline for his support of the rebellion.
In this timeline, with Tarkin serving Darth Minch and the new regime emphasizing cooperation over oppression, Bail Organa retained his position as Alderaan's senator while quietly supporting moderate reforms. Leia's confrontation with Vader, her biological father, became one of the defining moments of the New Order. She had been raised to believe in democracy, in the Republic's ideals, in the Jedi's philosophy of selfless service. Now she faced a cyborg who claimed to be her father, offering to train her in ways that combined light and dark, promising power beyond anything the rebellion could provide.
"You expect me to forget what the Empire did?" Leia's voice carried the steel that would have made her a formidable Jedi or Sith in any timeline.
The worlds you conquered, the people you killed, the terror you spread in the Emperor's name?
I expect you to see reality clearly, Vader replied. His vocabulary robbed the words of warmth, but not of sincerity.
Sidious's empire was built on fear and oppression. That empire is dead. What rises in its place offers something different, not perfect, not idealistic, but functional in ways that the Republic never achieved.
Your mother believed in peaceful solutions.
She would not have wanted you to continue fighting a war that no longer serves its original purpose. The mention of Padme Amidala hit Leia like a physical blow. She had never known her mother had only heard stories from Bail Organa about the senator who had fought against the Republic's corruption. The idea that this monster claiming to be her father had loved and lost the woman who gave birth to her seemed, yet through the Force, which Leia was only beginning to understand, she sensed the truth of his words and the genuine grief that underlay them. Luke Skywalker's journey followed a different path. Raised as a simple moisture farmer on Tatooine, he had dreamed of adventure among the stars. When Vader appeared with Darth Minch to collect him, offering training in the Force and a place in the New Order, Luke's initial reaction was excitement tempered by horror. His Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru had been killed by stormtroopers searching for R2-D2 in the original timeline. In this reality, with the Empire's methods less brutal, they lived but knew the truth about Luke's parentage.
"Your father wants to train you," Owen Lars said, his voice heavy with resignation. "We always knew this day might come."
But Luke, remember, power is not the same as wisdom. Your grandmother, Shmi Skywalker, was the kindest person I ever knew. She had no power, no connection to the Force, but she understood what truly mattered. Don't lose sight of that, no matter what they teach you. The training of the Skywalker twins became a grand experiment that would determine the future of Force philosophy. Vader taught them combat and the practical applications of both light and dark side techniques. Darth Minch provided deeper instruction in Force philosophy, meditation, and the ancient knowledge he had accumulated from Sith holocrons and Jedi archives. Other Dark Jedi contributed specialized skills, telekinesis, telepathy, precognition, but the true test came when the twins were exposed to situations that required them to choose how to apply their abilities. Luke, by temperament more aligned with compassion and connection, struggled with the dark side techniques that required channeling anger and hatred. Leia, more pragmatic and politically minded, found the dark side easier to access but recognized its corrupting influence and fought against losing herself to it. Their development over years represented a microcosm of Darth Minch's grand vision. Could Force users truly master both light and dark without being consumed by either? Could balance be achieved through individual discipline rather than through the conflict between opposing orders? The answers remained unclear, but the Skywalker twins represented the best hope for discovering them. Meanwhile, other developments shaped the galaxy's evolution. The Death Star, its construction completed, became a mobile academy where Force-sensitive students learned the combined philosophy. Grand Moff Tarkin commanded it with the same ruthless efficiency he had demonstrated under Sidious, but now directed toward building a lasting order rather than maintaining control through fear. Admiral Motti oversaw its military operations, coordinating with Vader's Dark Jedi to create a force capable of responding to threats anywhere in the galaxy within days. On Dagobah, Darth Minch continued his meditations, reaching out through the Force to maintain his invisible control over the Empire's direction. He rarely appeared in person, preferring to work through others and to maintain the mystique that surrounded him. Legends began to spread about the ancient being who had destroyed both the Jedi Order and the Sith, who commanded powers that exceeded anything seen in living memory, who had reshaped the galaxy according to a vision that transcended the limitations of both light and dark. But in his private moments, the doubts that had begun as whispers grew into undeniable questions. The Force itself seemed to push back against what he had created, as though the galaxy's fundamental energies rejected the artificial balance he attempted to impose. Natural balance emerged through conflict and resolution, through the struggle between opposing forces that eventually found equilibrium. What he had built was control disguised as balance, dominance masked by philosophy. The realization came gradually, accumulated across years of watching his new order function. The students he trained became powerful, yes, but also hollow in ways that were difficult to articulate. They lacked the passionate commitment to ideals that had driven the Jedi, even as those ideals ultimately proved insufficient. They lacked the pure ambition and hunger for power that characterized the Sith at their most dangerous. Instead, they were tools, effective, obedient, powerful tools, but tools nonetheless. He had created an order of Force users who wielded both light and dark without truly understanding either, who possessed power without purpose beyond service to the Empire he commanded. In the swamps of Dagobah, Darth Minch meditated on what he had accomplished. 8 centuries as a Jedi, teaching peace and light and selfless service, had led to the Order's destruction. Less than a decade embracing the dark side had reshaped galactic civilization. The lesson seemed clear. Power mattered more than principle, and those willing to use any means necessary would always triumph over those who limited themselves with arbitrary rules about honor and compassion. Yet, in his quiet moments, something troubled the ancient being who had once been Yoda. The Force itself seemed to whisper warnings. Balance, yes, but not the balance he had created.
true equilibrium required more than simply combining light and dark. It required understanding that some things were worth preserving, that not every lesson of the Jedi was born from weakness. The vision that had guided him since his fall, the certainty that he had been right to embrace the dark side, that the Jedi's destruction proved their philosophy's bankruptcy, began to crack around the edges. Perhaps he had not evolved beyond the Jedi and Sith. Perhaps he had simply become the latest in a long line of Force users who believed they had discovered the ultimate truth, only to impose their vision on a galaxy that suffered for their certainty. But such doubts came too late. The galaxy had been reshaped. Generations would grow up learning that both light and dark were tools to be wielded, that emotion and reason, passion and peace were complementary rather than contradictory. Whether this represented progress or catastrophe, only time would reveal. The Force, eternal and infinite, continued its endless cycle. Light and dark, creation and destruction, order and chaos, all necessary, all temporary, all ultimately balanced against each other across scales of time that made even 8 centuries seem like moments. And in that vast cosmic dance, one small green being had learned too late that understanding both sides of the Force did not grant the wisdom to use that understanding properly. The greatest tragedy was not that Yoda fell. The greatest tragedy was that in falling, he proved himself right about one thing. The Jedi's philosophy had been incomplete, their suppression of the dark side had weakened them, their denial of emotion had prevented them from truly understanding the Force. But in embracing the opposite extreme, he had simply replaced one incomplete philosophy with another, creating a new order that would inevitably face its own reckoning, as the Force sought true balance through means beyond any single being's comprehension. And so the galaxy turned, neither light nor dark fully triumphant, the Force itself the only true victor in an eternal struggle that would continue long after every Jedi, Sith, and fallen master had returned to the cosmic energy that birthed them. The story of Darth Minch remains a tale of what might have been, a nightmare scenario that fortunately never materialized in the galaxy we know. But it serves as a reminder that even the greatest champions of light carry within them the potential for darkness, that no being exists beyond corruption's reach, and that true balance requires constant vigilance against the seductive certainties offered by both extremes. If you found this exploration of a dark alternate timeline fascinating, there's so much more to discover in the vast lore of the Sith and the fallen Jedi, who embraced darkness. From the ancient Sith Empire to the rule of two, from forbidden techniques to terrible artifacts, the dark side's history spans millennia and contains secrets that even the Jedi Council never fully understood. Subscribe to Sith Lore for more deep dives into the darkness that shapes the Star Wars galaxy. Hit that like button if this dark vision of Yoda's transformation kept you engaged, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Which fallen Jedi's story should we explore next? What other alternate timelines would you like to see investigated? Your suggestions help shape the content we create, and we read every single comment. Until next time, may the Force serve your understanding, whether you seek the light, embrace the dark, or walk the dangerous path between.